Go and grab your Bibles, go to Matthew chapter 13. Brad just read verses 1 through 9. We're starting a new series this morning called The Secrets of the Kingdom. So it's just the same thing. We're going through Matthew, but now we're in chapter 13 where Jesus is now going to unveil the secrets of the kingdom. He's going to do so through what is called parables. So he's going to tell some stories, and he's going to walk us through some stories that reveal secrets of the kingdom of heaven. And so we're going to walk through that this morning. On the screen right now are some scripture I'm going to use this morning. I'm just using the same ones Jesus did. And so that's why that's on there. So I feel like that's a good place for us to start. So Meredith and I had the privilege of leading a small group of young adults, so college-age students. And if you know anything about college-age students, they know everything about everything. So it's amazing. We learn so much from these brilliant people. But one of my favorite things is when they go to school or when they start a job. And then they know everything about that thing they're studying or the thing they're working towards. Have you experienced that? So we got one guy in our group. I won't name any names, but it's Hunter Basco, and he started HVAC school, like HVAC, and so he's learning all about air conditioners and heating and cooling and stuff. And so he's always the one when we get into our room, he checks the thermostat first because he's the expert on that. And so he checks that and he lets us know how air conditioners work. It doesn't really cool the air, just takes the heat out. And so we've learned so much. There's this thing about Hunter and everybody, right? When you go through these training, it's like the things you're learning about, you see it everywhere. Have you noticed that? Like you just see it everywhere. Got another friend of mine who is a firefighter, and firefighters are a unique breed, man. They're a unique breed because they think everything starts fires. That's what they think. Everything starts a fire. So whenever he comes to our house, he tells us all the things we have to unplug in our house so our house doesn't catch on fire. And I'm like, so nothing stays plugged in? Is that how this works? So what do we do? How do we handle this? Meredith, my wife, is a dental hygienist, which means my kids have to brush their teeth all the time. That's what that means. They don't get to skip a day or so. I mean, they will be walking down the stairs. Meredith will be in the kitchen, be like, you didn't brush your teeth. I know it. I can see the plaque from here, off of the mirror. I can see it. You need to go and, right. So our kids, they have to floss. They have to brush their teeth, all the things. But Meredith has this way, because of her profession, she sees things the rest of us don't see. So I would just encourage you, just keep your lips closed when you talk to Meredith. She's seeing things that you don't want her to see. We were dating when she was in college, and so I was the first person she cleaned their teeth while she was learning in school. And so for 3 hours, I just sat with my mouth wide open, and she learned a lot about me in those 3 hours. And here we are. We're still here today. So things went well. And then even for us as pastors, right, our profession gives us a view of the world that's different from the rest of us. And so for many people think that pastors, what we do a lot is golf. And if you were to golf with me, you understand, no, he does not golf a lot. If he does, that's a waste of money. He should not be doing it as much. But what we do most of the time, just to be honest, is that we plan events. We are event planners. We are glorified event planners is what we are. And so whenever we go, Meredith and I would go to events or things. We went to one a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, I think it was ran poorly. I think the event was terribly run. I think it was awful. Because as pastors, we're used to planning events for large groups of people. We know how to order food and how to get cups and plates and all the things. Like you think through all the logistics. So you see the world in the way in which you are a profession. Those of you who you work in landscaping and lawn care. You don't see houses, you see yards. That's what you see. You don't see anything else, and you know all about the kinds of grass. You know what kind of grass grows here and grows there, and you know the types of seasons in which those grass will grow. You know all of those things. Those of you who work in trucking, you love McDonough because there are your people everywhere. You got your truckers everywhere. But you understand logistics. You get confused as to why this car's going here and that car's going there, and this truck should be going to that place. Why is it here? I say all that to say this. The things that we are passionate about, or at least the things that we know, we've been given an inside look to it. We've been given the secrets of those things. And because we see the secret, now we don't see life the same way anymore. We see things differently. And so Jesus here in Matthew 13, he's going to try to unveil some things about the kingdom of heaven. And he uses the phrase, the secrets of the kingdom. I don't want you to think he's trying to hold things out from us. The word there is mysterion, which is a mystery. He's going to unveil the mysteries of the kingdom. And he's doing all this here through a series of what he calls parables. So if we go back into it, Matthew chapter 13, we're going to read what Brad just read, study it, and then continue to study as Jesus reveals more and more to us. Matthew chapter 13, verse 1, that same day. So what same day? Well, back in Matthew chapter 12, we learned about this. It's the Sabbath. Jesus and his disciples were walking through grain fields. They were plucking grain, they were eating it. They bring Jesus into a synagogue and they put a man with a withered hand before him and say, heal this man. What are you going to do? It's the Sabbath. And Jesus says, yes, I'm going to do it. It's what I do. You can do good things on the Sabbath. From there, they have a plot to kill him, to arrest him and kill him. And then Jesus just goes off. We studied this last week. He just goes off on them and ultimately lands at this place of telling them they are in danger of blaspheming the Holy Spirit. They're in danger of saying no to the conviction of God one last time. Their hearts have become so hardened, they can't even see it. They can't see the kingdom right in front of them. And then as we finished Matthew 12, what we saw was that Jesus' family is outside and they think he's gone crazy. And they've sided with the crowds and they're trying to get him to calm down. And Jesus says, listen, I don't even know you people. These people here, these disciples, they're my new brothers and sisters and mother. These are my people now. So that same day, it's a big day. This is a full day for Jesus. So that same day, we read in Matthew 13:1, Jesus went out of the house where the crowds were gathered, makes his way through the crowd, and he goes by the sea. Because whenever you feel stressed out, where do you want to go? The beach, yes? So Jesus, I'm going to the beach, man. I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to get in a hammock, and I'm just going to put my feet up. That's what I'm going to do. So Jesus makes his way to the sea, and on the way there, the crowds continue to follow him, and they gather around him. You ever realize when you go on vacation, you don't just leave your stress in McDonough, it comes with you? Because your work wants to go to St. Augustine with you, and so it comes also. And so everything's following Jesus. He finds himself, so he gets into a boat and he sits down. And the whole crowd just stood there on the beach. So Jesus began to teach, and he told them many things in parables. Now this word parable, it's a unique word. It means to lay alongside, para meaning along, and bola meaning to throw or to cast alongside. So a parable is a story. It's a real life story with a heavenly purpose, but Jesus is going to lay this story, this earthly story, alongside of theological truth. So he's going to take this idea, he's going to lay it alongside some theological truth in hopes that two things. One, it'll help those who want to hear to understand more, and it will confuse those who have such hard hearts they'll never see it. There's a dual purpose to what's happening here. But before we get into that, I want to give us just a few understandings so we're on the same page as far as what parables are. First of all, they are not fables. In fables, turtles run faster than rabbits. In fables, animals talk. Parables are not fantasy. They're not fables. Jesus will use parables, but he'll pull real life examples, real life stories. They aren't made up. They're not fantasy. They aren't 7 little people going to find a ring in the middle of the earth. That's not what's happening here. This is about something real that they've experienced, and now he's laying alongside a theological truth. So they're not fables. Secondly, they're not allegories. What I mean by that is in an allegory, everything has symbolic meaning. So every character means something. Every name of that character means something. Parables are not like that. Parables are not intended for you to pick apart and make everything mean something. In fact, you get into a lot of trouble when you begin to do that. Well, the birds represent this, and this is what this is. It's not what's happening. They're different than that. Parables are different. With fables and allegories and fantasy and fairy tales, as humans, we're tempted to find the lesson, right? Aesop's fables, we want to find the lesson. And once we find the lesson, we pluck it up out of the story and we carry that forever. And that's the lesson. Parables are not like that. It's dangerous for us to read a parable, think you have the lesson, pull it out of the story, and then continue to walk in your life as though that's the point. Case in point, the prodigal son. Jesus tells the parable of a prodigal son. And in the moment, you think you've got the point. And then Jesus drops the older brother on you, and you're not really sure what the point is anymore. The point of a parable is not there in the middle. The point is the parable itself. The entirety of the story is the point. It's not about a lesson. It's about the illustration. It's about illumination. What I mean is that through parables, the entirety of the story, God is revealing something about himself. He's pulling the curtain back for us. An author by the name of Klein Snodgrass wrote a book about the parables of Jesus. And he says this, I think it's brilliant. Revelation from God is not merely thrown out and grasped on the run. In other words, parables are not fast food. Parables are crock pot meals on a Sunday afternoon. They're not meant to be consumed quickly as you're going about other things. Parables require us to sit under them and to feast on them, to enjoy everything that comes along with them. That's what a parable is. But the danger for us is to treat a parable like a fable or like an allegory. Give me the point, man. Give me the point and I'll go on from there. The problem is parables aren't work like that. They don't work like that. The cookies aren't on the bottom shelf. We have to do some work. It requires us to engage mentally and emotionally into it. They require our attention. So as we step into this first parable, which is actually a parable about parables, I just want to encourage us to lean in. It's going to require some attention for us to get it. So here's the parable. A sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path. So it had been the walkway, the sidewalk where everything is trodden down and hard. And the birds came and devoured the seeds. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil. Immediately they sprang up since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched. And since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds still fell on good soil, produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. So, summary of the parable, there's 4 types of soil. The sower is seeding seed on every single one of them. He's throwing out seed on all of these soils. So you can picture, it could just be one farmland, could be multiple. We don't really know, but the point is there's 4 soils. There's the hard soil where the seed does not make a dent in it at all. It's too hard, it's too impacted. The word Jesus uses is calloused. It's hard. The second is rocky. There's rocks in it, so the seeds make their way in between the rocks, but inside of rocks, no roots grow. And so it might spring up and yield some kind of fruit, but when the sun comes, it scorches it and it dies. Then there's another kind of soil, and this soil is thorny. And so the seed gets in, takes a little bit of root, and as it comes up, the thorns choke out whatever's being produced, and it dies. And then finally, the seed makes its way onto good soil, good, soft, nutrient-rich soil. And in that soil, the seed takes root and begins to show fruit, 60, 30, and 100-fold kinds of fruit. This is the parable. And so Jesus, being followed in the midst of his ministry, now about 2 years into ministry or so, is now declaring this. This is on the heels of his dissertation against the Pharisees. And the crowds have gathered. And Jesus tells the story, and the disciples have some problems with it. Verse 10, the disciples, the 12, come to him and say, "Why? What are you doing? What are you doing?" Like, I think we need a new marketing agent here, Jesus, because these people have come to you for the miracles. They love the miracles. They love even the sermon. Do the sermon again. Why are we talking about farming? Like, this is crazy. You just went off against the Pharisees. And so now you've got these people. You've got a crowd of people come around you. This is who the them is. Why are you speaking in parables to them? The them is, well, it's the Pharisees who have just been put in their place. It's the scribes who've been put in their place. It's those who have been healed, those who have witnessed the healing, those who have heard him say what he said about his family. They're just intrigued by this Jesus. And he has a moment. He has this moment now to capture all of them. And he sits in the boat and he talks about farming. And the disciples are like, "You've got to be kidding me. This? Like, you had a moment." And so they ask him, "What are you doing? Why are you speaking in parables?" And Jesus explains to them in verse 11, "Well, to you, not to them, to you, it's been given to know the secrets of the kingdom. You've seen behind the curtain. You know the mysteries of the kingdom. But to them, to this crowd, to some of them, it has not been given." What he's saying is just like those of us who are engaged in a particular kind of work, and now we see the world through that lens. He's like, you get it now. Like, I've opened your eyes to the kingdom, and now you see it everywhere. But for a lot of people, they don't see it. And he continues, "For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he does have will be taken away." Now, out of context, that's a prosperity preacher's dream right there, isn't it? Good night. That's a dream out of context. You want to get rich? Well, it's going to take some money to get rich. But in context, he's not talking about financial prosperity. He's not talking about wealth and health. This is about the kingdom. This is about wisdom and understanding the kingdom. So, for those of us who understand HVAC, Hunter, for those of us who understand HVAC, right? you learn more and more. The more you see, the more you understand. Those of us who fight fires, you understand that. You see the world differently. For those of us who are teachers, you see the world differently. And in fact, it's like you keep seeing things and you keep learning and you keep understanding. And if you're honest, I think you would say the same thing is true for the people that you know who are truly following Jesus. It's like once the gates have been opened, once the doors have been opened, the windows have been opened for them to see the kingdom, it's like they just keep learning and learning and learning and learning, and they're growing in it. But he's saying, but for some people, they're so hardened that even the things they do know will be taken from them. So he tells them, why do I speak in parables? Because I want those who can understand to understand more. And those who are so hardened, I want it to shock their system, that they don't know what they think they actually know. So maybe you can relate to this. Husbands, I think we're probably the best at this, but you'll come home from work, or your wife will come home from work, and your wife is telling you a story. And all you hear is Charlie Brown's teacher. You know what I mean? Wah, wah, wah. You hear it. And your wife is talking, telling you stories, and there's this moment where she realizes he's not paying attention at all, like at all paying attention. And some of our wives, what they'll do is they'll drop in something ridiculous to make sure you're paying attention. Like, oh, I was at the store, and then we got in a UFO, and then we went to Mars, and then we came back, and I got 4 tattoos, and if you're like, yeah, great. She's like, what are you doing? You are not paying attention at all. She'll drop these things in to make sure you're paying attention. This is what Jesus is saying. These parables are meant for 2 purposes. I want to engage those who are actually listening, who have ears to hear. Then I want to shock those who think they are listening but actually aren't. So this is why I speak to them in parables. And he continues. Because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. If I go about this the easy way, they're not getting it. Indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah, this is Isaiah 6, is fulfilled that says, you will indeed hear but never understand, you will see but never perceive or behold, for this people's heart has grown dull or calloused or hard, and with their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them. So it's like I'm trying to shock the system again. I'm trying to make them see that you're not actually listening. You think you are, but you're not, and I'm calling you out on it. Then verse 16, Jesus says to the disciples, but blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see and did not see, to hear what you hear and did not hear it. Blessed are you, you get it, you get it. And then to make sure they get it, he explains what he actually meant by it. So just to be clear, here's what I mean. Verse 18. Hear then, listen to the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, it's a key word, understand, the evil one comes and snatches away what's been sown in his heart. And this is what was sown along the path. So you got the hard path, and he's saying it's just like people who think they know, except it never takes root. So the evil one comes and takes away what even parts of that they thought they knew. As for what was sown on rocky ground, verse 20, this is the one who hears the word, immediately receives it with joy. But he has no root in himself. So he endures for a little while, but when tribulation or persecution arises on account of this word, immediately he falls away. He loves it. He takes the seed of the word of the kingdom. But then when things get tough, because he's believing that, he falls away. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, who hears the word of the kingdom, the good news, the gospel. But the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. This is the one who hears it, loves it, and then later on that week realizes, no, I love the world more than I love this. And the thorns choke out the word. So Jesus lays out these 3 soils. And what he's laying out for us is there are 3 things that keep the seed of the kingdom, of the word of the kingdom, from taking root. There are 3 things. And the first is pride. Pride. Pride is the hard soil. It's the way, it's the sidewalk. Pride creates in us a callousness in such a way that we can't actually hear what's being said. And in the crowd, you've got the Pharisees and the scribes, and Jesus is letting them know this is who they are. The seed's been scattered, it's been put in front of you. The kingdom is here. The word of the kingdom has been preached, but there is pride holding them back from hearing it. And what's the pride rooted in? The pride is rooted in they think they know better. They're the ones who have studied. They're the ones who have been to rabbinical school. They're the rabbis. They're the teachers. They're the leaders. And they built a whole system around it. So now we're 400 years past the last prophet, and they think they're the new prophets. They're the new ones who are in charge. And they're so familiar that they're actually unfamiliar with it. In this familiarity, Dallas Willard speaks of it, and he says, presumed familiarity leads to unfamiliarity. Unfamiliarity leads to contempt, and contempt leads to profound ignorance. So let's talk presumed familiarity. You know how you follow people on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and because of that, you think you know things about them? And so you've got friends and they've gone on vacation, and then you see them the next week or so, and because you know everything about where they've gone, you don't actually ask them about their trip, and so you assume things about their trip. Because we have presumed familiarity. We think we know things that we actually don't know. In context, he's speaking to those of us who have grown up in the church, who think we know things. We have presumed familiarity. Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, I saw that on the flannel graph. I know exactly what that's about. Or I heard that in a kid's story Bible. Or I knew this. So we have presumed familiarity, but that actually leads to unfamiliarity. And then when you're unfamiliar, you become contemptuous. You become angry about it. How dare you tell me? How dare you tell me what to do? I know what I'm doing. Those of you who are raising teenagers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The favorite phrase in our house is, yeah, I know. You literally don't know. Yeah, I know. What? You know that you don't know? Yes, I know. Okay. And that familiarity breeds contempt. Like, why are you telling me? You shouldn't be telling me. I know this. It's contempt, which then leads to profound ignorance. You're unwilling to learn. And I get it, man. I get it. You've been in church longer than I've been alive. You think my pants are too tight. I get it. I understand everything that you're saying. But what happens with presumed familiarity is that we think we know things we don't actually know. And while Jesus is calling out the Pharisees, I think for many of us, particularly those of us who have grown up in church, we're dangerously close to becoming Pharisaical ourselves. We think we know, so we don't let anybody teach us anything. So one of the main obstacles to the seed of the kingdom is pride. The second one is pain. It's the seed that's sown on the rocky soil. It takes root a little bit, like there's joy about it until life happens. And if you went to church camp, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You had that moment, that second to last night of camp where they lay out the gospel for you, and you're going to come back home and break up with that girl and burn those CDs, and you're going to do all the right things. And you come back home only to find that what you left is still there when you come back home. All the pain is there. All the insecurities are still there. Middle school is still there. High school is still there. And pain comes, and you think you're going to lean into Jesus only to find that no one wants you to lean into Jesus. And so pain robs us of growth. For some of us, it was you thought you had seeds planted when you were younger. And then you had to walk through cancer, you walked through the divorce of your parents, and that kind of pain actually kept the seed from growing. The third obstacle to the seed of the kingdom is the pursuit of pleasure, the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches. So yeah, the seed of the good news of the kingdom might have made its way in, but you started to realize, actually, that's hard. This life seems easier. I'm going to pursue that instead. It'll happen today. Right, you'll sit here, you'll have a moment of conviction, and then you'll get in your car and you'll forget all about it, and you'll begin thinking about work and a raise and a bonus and how to promote yourself and how to get this and how to sell this to get that, and the deceitfulness of riches chokes out the good news. But there's hope because there's a fourth soil in verse 23. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields. In one case 100-fold, another 60, and in another 30. This word understands is key for us. So while there's obstacles to the seed of the kingdom, there's opportunity, but that takes preparation. So how do we get to this good soil? We prepare the soil. That's how we get there. And that's what leads us to understanding. Now, understanding for us, we think is mental, right? It's a thing that happens in your mind. You understand something mentally. Well, to a Hebrew, to a first century Jew, that's not where it happens. In fact, there's actually there's no word for mind or brain. Understanding happens in the heart. And the word for understand means to put together, to synchronize, to put things together. You understand it, not just mentally, but in your very being, in your doing, in your seeing and understanding. And so Jesus is saying, the one who understands, this is the one who yields fruit. And this idea of understanding is the whole point of this whole chapter. So we got to get this down today. Look at the end of 23 again. After what is sown on good soil, the one who hears the word and understands it. So Jesus will tell a number of parables, and he'll wrap it all up by asking the disciples this question in Matthew 13:51. Have you understood all these things? Not does your mind know it? Not are you doing it? Have you put it all together yet? That's the question he's asking of them. Do you understand? And that happens in our hearts. So the question is, what is Jesus trying to explain? What do we need to understand? What we're trying to understand are the secrets of the kingdom, the mysteries of the kingdom. So what I want to do for the next 10 minutes or so is just to lay out what this means, what the mystery of the kingdom is. And here's what's going to happen. In the room today are 4 different kinds of soil. There's some of us who are so hardened and calloused against God. And you may not say it out loud, you may not even know that you are, but there's pride in you. And that pride is keeping you from understanding. You think you've got mental familiarity, but it's going to keep you from understanding. And I will say some things, and you're like, that's not right. That cannot be right. Because you've read some books, you heard a pastor 30 years ago, or you've got this idea from something that's become distorted over time, and you will buck against it. Then there's some in here who are like the rocky soil, and it will take root. Like, oh, yes, that's it. That's it. And you'll have this conviction high, like, yeah, I love getting convicted because it makes me feel alive. It feels like I'm doing something. And then over time, pain will arise, suffering will arise, and you'll just throw it all away because it's too hard to walk in. Then there's some of us who are the thorny soil this morning. And you will hear it, and it will take root, and then it won't take long before you're back after the world's riches yet again. And my hope is that there's some good soil in the room today who've had their hearts prepared through trial and tribulation, through study, through a good night's sleep, and who will hear it and will be overjoyed and produce fruit. So here's the secret. Here's the mystery of the kingdom that for many of us, we've gotten wrong for many, many years. As Jesus begins teaching, and he teaches about who he is and what he's come to do, we would think he's going to talk a lot about love, or he's going to talk a lot about the cross and about death and resurrection. But the number one thing Jesus talks about is the kingdom of heaven. And he talks about it in a way that's opposed to the kingdom of this world. So in Jesus' mind, this is what the secret of the kingdom is. There's 2 kingdoms. You've got the kingdom of heaven, and then you've got the kingdom of this world. This is how Jesus is going to teach the secrets of the kingdom. He's been doing this in the entire book of Matthew. And if you've had ears to hear, you've heard it. If you have eyes to see, you've seen it. There's 2 kingdoms. There's the kingdom of this world, and there's the kingdom of heaven. But what's happened for us is that it's become distorted a bit. Because over the course of the Old Testament, it's been referred to in different ways. So the kingdom of this world has been called the old creation. Or it's been called the age that was, or the age, this present age. And the new creation, the kingdom of heaven, has been called the new creation or the age to come. And so what's happened is we begin to create distorted views of what that means. We've begun to create ideas. When we say kingdom of heaven, we think about heaven. And you think about all the jokes of St. Peter, you think about the pearly gates and the streets of gold, and you think about, well, heaven is going to be all the things that I like. Well, here's the problem with that idea. What if I don't like the things that you like and I'm there too? Then what? Like, and if your mind is a Georgia fan, Kingdom is watching 1980 replays all day long, watching Herschel Walker. That's what you want to do. As a Florida fan, that feels like hell to me, not heaven. And so if heaven is everything you want, then what do I do? Like, as a Florida fan, I know you're going to tell me where I should go. I know, I understand that, but don't say it in church. So we built this idea about what heaven is. And because of that, then, we've built a really shoddy idea. It's been taught now, and if not taught, then insinuated for a number of years, that the whole point of the Christian life is to leave the kingdom of this world and get to the kingdom of heaven. So we've been taught, whether it's insinuated or taught, boldly, that the whole point of this life is just to deal with this world until God burns it down and then get to the next one. That's what we've been taught. We've been taught the whole point is that this place is going to hell in a handbasket, literally, and the whole point is to get out of here, to escape this place, to get to the next place. And so it's changed. It's changed the way that we communicate what salvation is. So we communicate salvation as a way to transfer yourself from the problems of this world, of earth, and that when you die, then finally you'll get to heaven. That's how we've communicated salvation. Do you know where you're going to go when you die? This fractures how we share the gospel. It's given us distorted ideas about what heaven is like. It's given us distorted ideas about what revelation actually means. It's created all sorts of issues for us. This idea that everything you experience here is just to be endured. And once you endure it, it'll be better when you're dead. Well, then what's the logical solution to that? To die. That's the logical solution. How do I get there quickly? And so as Jesus begins to unpack this, though, it's not how he proclaims it at all. It's not how he explains the gospel. Because this leads to a distorted view of ourself, that I'm the point. My comfort is supreme. My joy is supreme. And because this world doesn't bring me any of that, I can't wait till I get to the next place. It distorts how we view suffering. It distorts all of it. That suffering is a thing to escape, not a thing to steward well. It changes the way we view pleasure and success. Success comes to me because I'm a good person. It changes everything. But that's not the message of Jesus. And it's fine if you want to believe this about the kingdom. Your only problem is the Bible. That's your only problem. Your only problem is the Bible does not teach this. 80s televangelists, they preach this. Jesus does not teach this. Because when Jesus comes on the scene in Matthew chapter 4, his sermon that he repeats over and over and over again, the message is, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is here. It's come now. And so this is what Jesus is teaching. Jesus is teaching that the kingdom of heaven has invaded the kingdom of earth. Now, I'm not saying that at the end of times, God doesn't redeem and restore all things. There's no crying. Yes, all of that. Yes and amen to all of that. But I think our issue is thinking about how we get to that place. This is the secret. The secret of the kingdom is that the sower spreads seed out. And sometimes people receive it. And sometimes they receive it until one of the problems, one of the kingdoms of the world makes its way in and it gets choked out or it dies. But this is the point Jesus is making throughout his ministry. The kingdom is here and now. This is what Jesus means when he talks about the word of the kingdom in verse 19, the secret of the kingdom in verse 11. It's what he proclaims in Matthew chapter 4, that it's here and it's now. This has been the message of Jesus his entire ministry. The kingdom of heaven has invaded earth. And it's invading the kingdom of this world even to this day. And I want you to be able to see it. I want you to have eyes to see it. Not to dream of another day in the future, but to see that heaven has invaded earth today, right now. Right now. We don't have to wait to get to Jesus. He's already come to us. And if the king is here, the kingdom comes with him. I want you to see it. That's what Jesus is saying, because for the Pharisees, they had the old idea that one day we're going to escape this God-forsaken place. This place is not God-forsaken, it's God-indwelled. Emmanuel, God with us. You don't escape it to get to somewhere else. We look for Jesus in the midst of it. The kingdom of heaven is invading. It's making its way through the kingdom of this world. It explains everything for us. It explains it. It explains the church camp high. You want to know why you felt that way? Because you had a glimpse of the kingdom of heaven. But we still live in between these two kingdoms, so you came back home and you found the kingdom of the world again. It explains deconstruction. It explains people walking away from their faith, and it explains transformation when our eyes are open to see it. This explains rebellion. It explains why people will hear the same sermon but respond to it in a multitude of different ways. It explains pride. Because when the kingdom of heaven invades our kingdom, our only response is to preserve ourselves. So we get proud. No, that's not what it is. No, you don't get to tell me how to live my life, who to marry, if I should get married. You don't get to tell me those things. No, the kingdom of heaven absolutely gets to tell you those things. It explains pride, it explains suffering. You wanna know why there's suffering in this world? Because of the kingdom of this world. That's why there's suffering. It's awful. God hates it. But he isn't rescuing us from suffering. He's redeeming it through the infusion, the invasion of the kingdom of heaven. It explains our suffering and our pride and explains our success. It explains all of it. Just inviting you to look around, to behold it, to see it, have eyes to see. Just think about the places where you live and you work and you play. It's the kingdom of heaven invading the kingdom of this world. It changes the way we view our neighbors. Because your annoying neighbor is not the person you need to escape from, it's the person you need to engage with. Because the point of all of this is not to escape, but to engage. It's the whole point. The whole point of the kingdom is not to escape to somewhere else, but to engage in the present now. It changes everything for us. We have a role to play. Look at verse 23 again. That's for what was sown on good soil. It's the one who hears the word of the kingdom and understands, who sees it everywhere, who sees the kingdom of heaven invading the kingdom of this world. This is the one who bears fruit and yields in different levels, 100-fold, 60, and 30. But you know what's brilliant about fruit? Where there's fruit, there are seeds. More fruit produces more seeds. How does the sower scatter his seed? By producing more fruit. That's how. Well, then, what is the fruit? Well, I'm glad you asked, because Paul tells us in Galatians 5. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And against those things there is no law, which means you can have as much of that as you want. And where those things are present, seed is being scattered. This is what it means to engage. That when God plants seed in good soil, and good soil produces more fruit, and fruit produces more seed, that seed falls on all sorts of soil. It falls on it, which again, back to your neighbor. Your neighbor is not meant to be escaped from. The government is not meant to be escaped from. America is not meant to be escaped from. This county, I love you, is not meant to be escaped from. It's meant for you to engage. Why? Because God looked down the tunnel of time and he placed you where he placed you on purpose, with that neighbor in that school, with that teacher and that boss. He did it. Why? That you might produce fruit that produces seeds that falls on all types of soil. Well, my neighbor's so hard. Is he? What do you know? Well, I felt like I really did that with my kids, but it just felt like they fell back into the world. Oh, well, what do you know? It's almost like Jesus said that. Our job is to be the soil by which seed plants itself and then produces fruit, that fruit might yield more seed that falls on more types of soil. It's the invasion. It's the kingdom of heaven. But as long as we operate by the escapist mentality, we'll never bear fruit. Have you ever met anyone like that who was actually joyful? Who loved people well? I mean, they're dying and going to hell anyway, so why do I care? No, exactly. Because the kingdom of heaven has invaded their kingdom. That's why. And he's invaded it by you, by your presence alone. And like I said, every single one of us in the room today fits into one of these soils. And to be honest and vulnerable with you, it's been a struggle for me the past 4 to 6 weeks or so. I just really wrestled with, why do we even do this? Like, why do we do this? And maybe it's because we're raising a teenager, and that's why I feel this way in a lot of different ways. But so why do I get up here for 45, 50-ish minutes and teach this, only to have you walk out continuing in unrepentant sin? Why? Like, why? I know some of your stories. It breaks my heart, and I'm pleading with you. And I'm trying to lay out the good news of the gospel and invite you into this journey, but you continue. I'm like, why? Why are we doing this? Does it even matter? Does 45 minutes on a Sunday morning even matter at all? Like, does it matter? And then you come to this and it's like, well, yeah, because in the room there's still some good soil. And I don't get to choose the soil. But the invitation is that you would prepare your soil, that you would walk in this preparation. So there's some in the room today who have hard hearts. You're contemptuous, you're proud, and you're angry. And here's the truth. It will take an act of God to soften your soil. And he loves you enough to do it. And I know that because he's done it for me. He embarrassed me and called me out, and my soil has never been softer. And when I read that those who have understanding get more and more, I'm like, yes, it's true. It's absolutely true. God had to soften my soil. And there's some of us today who you're rocky. You're going to hear it and you'll grab hold of something for a little while. And then pain will come, suffering will come. You'll lose a job. Someone will become your manager that you don't want to become your manager. It's going to happen. And I am hell-bent on the idea that my job is not to teach you how to have a happy life. It's to teach you how to have roots that when trials and tribulations come, you stand firm in the midst of them. And I think one way of doing this is to open your eyes that you see we're not trying to escape this place. God's called us to redeem it. He's going to scatter seed through the fruit of you and me. Then there are some who are thorny, and you're going to hear it. But it's not going to be long before you're back to loving the things of the world. And it breaks my heart because there's hope in that, right? There's hope when we start to see things happen and then it's, I don't know. But the truth is there are some of us today who our soil is prepared today to hear some stuff. And for some, we've prepared our own soil through study and a good night's sleep, and we've prepared for this. Some, God's prepared the soil by an act of God this past week, and you faced tragedy and things that you never thought you'd have to walk through. We had a funeral here yesterday for a 20-year-old girl who died. No one thinks they have to walk through that. And yet I am strong enough in my faith to believe that's part of the invasion of the kingdom of heaven. And that God's going to use it. He's using it right now. He's using it. He's softening soil. He's tilling up the ground. For 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, like, are you sure? Like, are you sure? And for parents to start to actually have conversations with their children, to actually engage with them. I think he's doing it. So for some of you, you've been prepared by an act of God to hear it today. Some God has led you to preparing. And here's the hope for me. Those of us with good soil, would you take it? Let this seed take root in your heart today. As Brandon makes his way up and we conclude today, I think that's just the question I have for us today. Is your soil prepared to hear it? Because as we read back in chapter 12, today's no might be your last one. And I don't mean to scare you, but I want to be honest with you. There's only so many times you can harden your heart against the move of the Spirit. And for some of us, it's the conviction of salvation, right? It's that. It's drawing us into following Jesus. And this is good news for you. That God has prepared your heart for this message, for this good news of the kingdom. That heaven has come. Jesus is here now. You don't have to wait. He's here now. You can experience all of that now, glimpses of it now, peace beyond understanding now, joy now, love now, hope now, not in some distant place, but here and now, right now. That's the good news of the gospel. For some of us, he's prepared us for that. But I think there's some of us today that there's other things that we've been convicted about that we're supposed to be walking in that you have not been obedient to. And this soil, the more you say no to it, is growing harder and harder and harder. And then God swoops in with some act of divine power and softens the soil. So now the question today is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to be obedient and find everything he has for you to bear fruit again? Or do we continue to walk unrepentant, as rocky and thorny and hard? So that's the invitation today. Either to allow God to prepare your heart through his divine acts, or to continue to walk with him in preparation of your soil today. That's the invitation. And I'm pleading with you. I will tell you, in my own testimony, I'd rather do it myself than have to have God do it to me. It's the invitation today. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? Just want to invite you to process and think And not to chew on this as some sort of fast food meal, but to really let it marinate a bit today. We can become so familiar with passages that they just don't mean what they used to mean to us. And some of us, this presumed familiarity has led us to an ignorance, a feeling of, yeah, I know. Do you know? Like, do we really know? The kingdom of heaven is here and it's now, and the invitation is to be part of it today. To believe that Jesus is who he says that he is. He's the king and he's brought his kingdom with him. You would open your eyes to it. For some of us, I think what we need to ask the Lord is to give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Because maybe it's hard to see it today. What I love about the Bible is that it tells us that God knows. He knows it's hard for us. He remembers we're just dust. And so he meets us in it. And he, through the Spirit, opens our eyes to see it, that he's good. He's working and he's moving. So where's your soil today? Have you prepared it to receive the word of the kingdom? Father, we come to you desperate for you to open our eyes, because there are things that are mysteries to us in our flesh that when our eyes are opened in the Spirit become profound truths that we can't get out of our heads. And I praise you that you've done it for me. And so now, God, I'm asking on behalf of my brothers and sisters that you would open their eyes to see it, to see every act, every day as a gift in a way that you are invading kingdom of earth. God, I pray that you'd open our eyes to see even the most mundane things in the light of your goodness and grace. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear today. It's in Jesus' name I pray.